They watched us like we were a disease. Quietly, from the shadows of their golden thrones, behind shimmering energy shields and rules written in languages older than our solar system. The Galactic Council. 13 ancient races who ruled everything beyond Earth's reach. They called themselves Keepers of Balance. We called them cowards. They didn't come when our oceans boiled, when Earth cracked from the inside out, or when the megacorps turned continents into wastelands. They watched, measured, judged, and decided we weren't worth saving. I was 15 when the riots started in the lower straits. By 23, I was leading a scavenger unit through the ruins of what used to be New Berlin. The skies were black, not from war but from smoke, the kind that never leaves your lungs once you breathe it in. We had no sunlight, no peace, no future, but somehow we still had fight. That's the thing they never understood about humans. When everything is taken from us, home, safety, dignity, we become something else. Not broken, not beaten, we become dangerous. The first time the Council noticed us wasn't when we sent a ship into deep space. It was when we took one of theirs down, a stealth frigate, sleek, quiet, built for surveillance, not war. But we hit it hard, scavenged what we could, and buried the rest deep in the Karsus Ridge. I saw the pilot. Not human. Long limbs, skin like polished iron, and eyes that never blinked. He didn't beg, didn't fight. He just stared, cold and silent, like he already knew how this ended. They called a summit that cycle, council members gathering in their ancient halls, voices echoing through marble and plasma. I saw the recordings, the way they talked about us, as if we were insects who somehow learned to build fire. "We should have intervened 2 centuries ago," one of them said. "No," another replied, slithering beneath a veil of mist. "Intervention breeds dependency. Let them die as all lesser species do." But we didn't die. We built, not the polished kind of tech you see in the council's halls. No, ours was ugly, raw, and fused together with blood and desperation. A mix of stolen alien blueprints, repurposed satellites, and nuclear cores from submarines that had been rusting since the Third Flood. We didn't wait for help. We stole time. I remember the launch of Deliverance, the first human ship that could break the quantum lock the Council enforced on our system. It wasn't beautiful. It was a beast, scarred, loud, shaking like hell. But when it broke through the barrier, and that alert echoed across the Council's galaxies, they knew. They knew they had waited too long. I was inside mission control that night, surrounded by cables, flickering monitors, the stink of stale coffee and unwashed uniforms. My name is Kyle Ryman, former scavenger, now liaison to the Exodus program. And when Deliverance vanished into hyperspace, I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just stared at the screen, listening to the silence that followed. Because I knew. The Council wouldn't stay quiet forever. But for the first time in 100 years, we weren't trapped anymore. We were loose, and that terrified them more than anything. 3 days after Deliverance broke the lock, everything changed. We had protocols, scramble drills, silent mode directives, blackout phases, but nobody really knew what came next. We'd planned for resistance, retaliation, even extinction, but nothing happened. No warships, no warning, just silence. That kind of quiet? It doesn't mean peace. It means calculation, the kind of silence you get before a predator moves. And the Council? They weren't peacekeepers. They were farmers. We were the cattle. They didn't like it when livestock started building fences. I stayed underground those first days, running diagnostics on the quantum echo drives. The tech we pulled from that alien frigate, what we called the skeleton, still didn't make sense. We patched it with human materials, guessed at its interface, rewired it to bypass the Council's dimensional anchors. But it worked. Somehow it worked. That terrified me more than anything, because we didn't understand why it worked. And humans? We tend to mess up most when we think we've figured everything out. The higher-ups wanted to celebrate. They talked about the Great Escape, about spreading humanity to the stars, carving out our own sector, flipping off the council from light years away. But I couldn't stop thinking about what might be watching us through the cracks we left behind. And I wasn't the only one. His name was Draven Holt, ex-pilot, born in the slums of the Europa Ring, orphaned during the oxygen riots, military-trained, dishonorably discharged. A bastard of war with a chip on his shoulder and a plasma burn down half his face. He was the last person I expected to walk into my lab at 0300 with frost on his boots and blood on his collar. "They're already here," he said. I looked up from the monitor, blinking the fatigue away. "What?" "I saw it," he said. "Out past the edge of Lagrange Station, not a ship, a beacon, council grade, emitting in the old tones, the ones they use for warnings." I stared at him, trying to process. "They left us a message?" I asked. "No." He dropped a data chip on my desk. "They left a sentence." I slid the chip into the side port. The screen flickered. Static burst, then reformed into lines of angular glyphs. Council script, high dialect. Only a few of us could read it. I translated it aloud. "You were never prisoners. You were an experiment. The lab is now contaminated." My throat tightened. "They don't want to stop us," Holt said. "They want to burn everything we touched." The council had rules. Unspoken, brutal rules. They didn't fight wars. They ended outbreaks. When a species showed signs of rebellion or unpredictability, they didn't debate. They cleansed. Quietly, efficiently, with weapons older than stars. The beacon meant one thing. We'd crossed their threshold. They no longer saw us as a curiosity. They saw us as a contagion. We had to warn the Exodus ships. Deliverance was just the first. 3 more were prepped and waiting for green light. If the Council scorched Earth, those ships would be all that remained of our species. I had friends on those ships, family, people who still believed in the dream. I left the lab at dawn, skies still ash-colored, the city glowing under emergency power. Holt followed close behind, rifle strapped tight, gaze cutting through shadows like he expected the world to collapse any second. The Exodus command hub was buried deep inside the Boreal Ridge. We made it there by midday, passing through 4 biometric gates, 2 manned checkpoints, and a DNA scrub. Inside, the Council of Engineers and Fleet Officers was already meeting. I pushed through the heavy doors. "Shut down the launch sequences," I said. "Now." Commander Lenore, grizzled, gray-bearded, eyes sharp like he'd never truly slept, stood from his chair. "Kyle," he said calmly, "you better have something real." Holt tossed the beacon data chip on the table. "They've tagged us," he said. "We're not on their watch list anymore. We're on their eradicate list." The room went quiet. Not shocked quiet, calculating quiet. "We knew this was coming," Lenore said after a long pause. "The Council doesn't negotiate. They dissect. We move ahead." "You didn't read the last part of the message," I said, turning back to the monitor and typing rapidly. The translation unspooled. "The species will be rendered null, all traces erased, reversal not authorized." "This isn't a war," I added. "It's an extinction protocol. They don't care if we're in orbit or deep space. They'll follow our quantum trail and wipe us out. All of us." "What's your solution?" Lenore asked. "We fake our collapse." The room looked at me like I'd lost it. "We rig Deliverance 2, I explained. "Send it out with the worst echo signal possible. Sloppy. Deliberate. Let the Council intercept it. Inside it's a bomb, an entropy core, old tech. Stable enough until detonation." Lenore narrowed his eyes. "You want to bait the Council?" Number I want to convince them they already won. Let them think Earth tore itself apart, trying to break their lock. Give them evidence. Give them noise. Make it ugly. And the real ships? We launch them in the shadow of the fake one. Mask their exits, different coordinates, deep slip trajectories, scatter across sectors. We bury our signature behind the illusion. Holt nodded beside me. It's our only shot. Lenore looked at the table, hands folded tight. He didn't speak for a while. Finally, he muttered, "If this fails, we'll die in silence." I looked him in the eye. We already are dying in silence. The prep took 72 hours. We gutted Deliverance 2, rewired its emitters to Project Chaos. Gave it a pulse like Panic, choppy, broken, leaking energy trails that no half-decent civilization would miss. We loaded the entropy core in last. A weapon made from Earth's darkest days, unstable, illegal, and terrifying. The kind of thing that bends reality when it goes off. Meanwhile, the real ships were moved off-grid. No signals, no lights, just raw stealth, riding gravitational edges and diving into the void like ghosts. I said goodbye to Holt before he boarded the last real ship, Hopefire. He didn't smile, just offered a handshake, firm and quiet. "If they find us," he said, "you better make sure they regret it." "They will," I promised. When the fake ship launched, we all watched from the ground. Its engines screamed through the sky like a dying animal. Messy, loud, vulnerable, perfect. Council probes picked it up within hours. We tracked their signal reverb through the skeleton's old systems. They fell for it. One of their dread forms, a thing we called the Veil, intercepted it near the edge of the Centauri drift. Seconds later, the entropy core triggered. What happened next wasn't an explosion. It was a disappearance. The Veil didn't break apart. It vanished, folded into itself like it had never existed. No debris, no signal, no aftermath, just erased. They'd been expecting chaos. Instead, they got warning. We didn't cheer. We didn't speak. We just stood in that command room, watching the stars burn, wondering if we'd just declared a silent war on gods. Because now they knew we were willing to strike. Now they knew we were learning. And that was the one thing they feared more than escape. They feared evolution. 3 days after the Veil vanished, we got our first message. It wasn't a broadcast. Wasn't a signal we could track. It came through the skeleton's core, deep inside the alien tech we never fully understood. A voice. Mechanical. Layered with distortions, like it was being filtered through thousands of years of dead languages. But even through all that, we heard it loud and clear. Violation acknowledged, sentience acknowledged, isolation terminated. There was no emotion in the words, just a fact being stated. Cold. Final. That was their way of saying, "We see you now." It should have felt like victory, but to me it felt like a death sentence with no timestamp. We were never supposed to get this far. That's the part that kept chewing at my gut. Every time we made a leap, quantum distortion, entropy weapons, stealth launches, we were jumping blind. We were like cavemen lighting a fire in a forest full of gas. And now the forest was waking up. I kept my head down for the next few weeks. After the fake launch and the Council's eerie silence, Command split into 2 camps, those who believed we'd fooled them, and those who thought we'd just poked a sleeping god in the eye. I was in the second group. Lenore assigned me to lead the Pulse Division, our last resort fallback. It wasn't glamorous. No sleek ships or cutting-edge AI, just raw data, ancient broadcasts, signal leaks, anything the Council might be hiding in plain sight. And that's where I found it. A ghost. It was buried in a scrambled loop from 32 years ago, a deep space radio ping, recorded by an old abandoned listening station on Phobos. We called it Station Gray. It hadn't been active since the Mercury Accords collapsed. The file was incomplete, corrupted by time, solar flares, and deliberate council interference. But the pattern was there. A rhythm. A message tucked inside a frequency that didn't belong to any human tech. I cleaned it up, took days, burned through every decryption algorithm I had, ran it through every surviving AI core. What came out wasn't just a message, it was a warning. Do not attempt ascension. The experiment is already compromised. Earth variant showing erratic anomaly. They were talking about us. 32 years ago, they already knew. I sat there in the dark, the hum of the servers buzzing in my ears, just staring at the screen. We weren't just some late-game threat. We were always the problem, from the start. We were supposed to fail, collapse, eat ourselves alive. But we didn't. That anomaly? That was our refusal to die. And now I had proof they'd planned to end us long before we ever reached the stars. I brought the data to Lenore. He didn't look surprised. Just tired. I figured, he said, lighting one of those old-world cigarettes he smuggled in from the frozen vaults. The Council doesn't wait until you're dangerous. They kill you before you're inconvenient. We have to show this to the Exodus fleet, I said. They need to understand, this was never about containment. This was about extermination, from day one. We show them, he said, puffing smoke into the stale air, and they panic. We're barely holding this illusion together. You think they'll stay the course if they find out the Council had them marked for death before they even left orbit? They have a right to know. He gave me a hard look. And what happens when they start turning on each other? You think we've weeded out all the sympathizers? You think everyone out there is loyal? The room went quiet. Because that was the real threat. Not the Council's weapons, or ships, or age-old laws. It was the spies. We called them eyes. Humans who'd been turned, bought, broken, rebuilt with nanoware, Council implants, or old indoctrination tech. Some were subtle, whispers in back rooms, strange hesitations, data leaks that couldn't be traced. Others were blunt, saboteurs, killers. One had taken out an entire food reserve module on Hopefire before the launch. We stopped him, but not before 12 crew starved on the way out of orbit. And now that I had this file, I realized something worse. They didn't just have spies here. They had them out there, among the Exodus fleet. On the ships we couldn't reach anymore. In the worlds we hadn't even colonized yet. We hadn't escaped. We'd scattered the infection. And no one knew who was clean. I tracked down the encryption origin of the Phobos file. It wasn't human. It wasn't Council either. It was something older, fragmented, organic and mechanical at once. What little was left hinted at a third party, a group that had warned the Council, a rogue faction, maybe even another failed experiment. I called it the fracture, because that's what the pattern looked like, a break in the Council's control, a ripple that never quite smoothed over. It gave me an idea, a dangerous one. If someone out there had resisted them once, maybe they'd do it again. I started working on a beacon, not to warn Earth, not to call for help, to find them. The fracture, the ones who'd seen what we were and still tried to send a warning through static and time. I didn't tell Lenore, didn't tell the fleet. This one was mine. Because if the Council had plans for us, I wanted someone, anyone, to see that we were fighting back, even if that someone wasn't human. The first tests failed. The skeleton's core rejected every modified signal burst I sent. It twisted them, absorbed them, fed them back as noise. It was alive in ways we still didn't understand. Sometimes I swore it listened. Other times, it felt like it mocked me. I spent nights down there, alone in the dark, fingers bleeding from rewiring old ports and scraping nanometal plating off broken relays. On the 6th night, the beacon activated. Just once. It lit up the lab with a pulse that knocked me back into the wall. Everything went black. When I woke up, the skeleton was humming. Low and deep, like a growl from something sleeping just beneath the skin of the world. And in the middle of the screen? 2 words. We see. I didn't know if it was them, the fracture, or just another cruel trick of ancient tech, but I saved the file, marked it, burned it into a hardline cable and buried it 3 levels beneath the command deck. Insurance, because things were changing. Fast. 2 weeks later, we got word from HFY. Not a distress call, not a message, just static, followed by 1 word repeated in a loop. Turncoat. No context, no coordinates, no names, just a signal carved into dead space like a gravestone. Lenore called me in. They've got one on the inside, he said. We don't know who or why, but HFY is off course. It's not heading to the Arc cluster anymore. Where's it going? He looked at me, voice cold. Back. I felt my stomach drop. Back to Earth? No, he said. Back to them. I didn't sleep for 3 days after the HFY broadcast. That 1 word, turncoat, kept playing in my head like a damn metronome. It wasn't just a signal. It was an accusation, a confession, a warning. We'd always suspected the Council had their claws in us, but we hadn't realized how deep the infection went. Someone out there, on one of humanity's last surviving ships, had flipped. And they weren't just giving up coordinates. They were bringing something back. I sat in silence while Lenore brought up the data trace. The Exodus fleet was split across 5 vessels: Deliverance 1, HFY, New Bastion, Vigilant, and Glass Arc. All of them had launched within 48 hours of each other, following scatter paths to separate ends of the sector. Only HFY had deviated. Its trajectory had veered 22 degrees off vector, skipping 3 scheduled gravity assist points, cutting through dark space like it had a map to something we didn't. Worse, its quantum engine was running hot. Too hot. It meant one thing. It had help. Someone's guiding them, I muttered. No way they're navigating this kind of deep void unaided. They've got tech beyond what we gave them. Lenore gave a dry nod. Council tech. Or worse. He looked at me. Worse. I tapped the hard drive I'd buried under the lab 3 weeks ago. The one with the fracture message. We're not the only experiment, I said. Something else was in the Council's labs, something that didn't die. What if HFY made contact? You think this is a second group? I think someone, or something, got inside HFY, and now it's dragging that ship toward a fate we don't understand. Lenore leaned back in his chair, silent for a while. Then he stood. I want you on the Vigilant. You'll intercept, quietly. No fleet announcement, no panic. You board HFY, find out what's on that ship, and, if necessary, shut it down. My stomach knotted. Shut it down how? You know how. They launched me in silence. No goodbyes, no ceremonies. Just me, a stealth shuttle, and enough oxygen to last 5 days. Vigilant was already in position, coasting along its assigned route like a loyal hound, ears perked. When I boarded, I was met by Captain Jaren, ex-Siberian Guard, eyes like broken glass and arms scarred with old frostbite. Not a man who asked questions, just gave you the gear and expected you to make it home. Or not. You'll dock through the underbelly, he said. No transmissions, no alerts. If they see you coming, they'll run or kill the evidence. Any idea how many crew turned? We lost visual logs 3 days ago. Could be one, could be all of them. And what's the chance HFY is still clean? He snorted. That ship's as clean as a junkyard dog. The ride over was quiet. Just the hum of the engines and the whisper of recycled air. I checked my gear 3 times. Pulse pistol, EMP knife, deep scan neural dampeners. The last one was critical. If someone on that ship had council upgrades, they could scramble your brain before you got close. I docked at the service hatch under Hopefire's hull. The door opened with a hiss, followed by silence so deep it pressed against my ears. No lights, no greeting, no crew, just the hum of systems still running, like the body of a dead animal with a heart that hadn't gotten the message. I moved slowly, deck by deck. The ship was intact, no signs of struggle or sabotage, but the atmosphere felt wrong. Not quiet, expectant, like the walls were waiting. Then I found the first body. Male, young, technician class, no wounds, no bruises, just empty, like someone had drained the soul out of him and left the shell behind. Eyes wide open, skin pale but unmarked. I checked the logs. No alerts, no medical entries, no sign of what had happened. I kept moving. The control deck was sealed, emergency lockdown. Only high-clearance personnel could access it, but I wasn't here to follow protocol. I spliced the panel, forced a reboot, and cracked it manually. Inside, I found her. Commander Aldra Vey, pilot of Hopefire, still breathing, hooked to the neural core. But she wasn't there. Her eyes were open, but she didn't blink, didn't speak, just stared ahead while the wires pulsed across her scalp, feeding into the ship's navigation AI. The AI was offline. She was flying this ship manually, from inside her own head. And something was talking to her. I moved closer, carefully sliding the dampener to max range. The hum in the room changed. The wires flexed. Then her lips moved. "You're late," she whispered. I froze. "Aldra?" "They said someone would come. Said you'd kill me. No one's killing anyone. I'm here to bring you back." "There's no back," she murmured, blinking for the first time. Her pupils were dilated, completely black. "Only forward. They showed me." "Who?" Her voice cracked. "The ones the council buried." "The fracture." "They showed me what's coming," she said. "You don't understand, Kale. We were never meant to reach the stars. We were meant to poison them." I stepped back, pulse pistol raised. "Aldra, disconnect. Now." "They built the stars to contain the damage," she whispered, "but we're the mistake they couldn't kill." The wires twitched. "I'm not the turncoat," she said. "You are." Then the alarms triggered. The ship went red. "Quantum anchor detected. Reversion in progress." That's when I understood. She wasn't taking Hopefire to the council. She was taking the council to us. I had 3 minutes to act. I pulled the pulse knife, sliced the neural cords feeding into her spine. She didn't scream, didn't even twitch. Just shut down, like a machine being unplugged. The ship stuttered. Engine pulses died. Navigation scrambled, but the anchor had already sent its echo. Coordinates were out. Our location was compromised. I made it to the shuttle, barely. By the time I reached Vigilant, the quantum field was warping. And just beyond the edge of real space, something massive was forming. A silhouette, black against the stars. The council had arrived. They didn't come in ships. Not in the way we understood them. No engines, no visible weapons, no landing gear. They arrived like a shadow being peeled off the edge of space. Silent, fluid, and impossibly vast. The kind of presence that made you feel like your skin was inside out. A construct of pure distortion, held together by laws no human had ever named. We called them judges. And when one arrived, it meant the trial was over. The sentence was already decided. I watched from Vigilance Bridge as the entity slipped through the quantum veil. Every scanner went blind. Lights flickered. One of the crew started bleeding from his eyes just from looking at the thing. His brain didn't crash from fear. It rejected reality. "It's not scanning us," someone whispered. Number it didn't need to. It already knew who we were. And it wasn't here for us. It was here for Hopefire. I made the call to evacuate. Jaren didn't argue. Vigilant peeled away on auxiliary engines, running silent, slipping back into the shadow corridor we'd arrived from. No transmissions, no pulse beacons. We left Hopefire floating dead in space, drifting toward the thing like a lamb stepping into a furnace. Aldra was still aboard. I wanted to pull her out, but it was too late. She'd made her choice, and I'd cut her free of the system too late to stop the signal. The judgment protocol had already been initiated. From the shuttle window, I watched it unfold. The judge didn't fire a weapon. It didn't need to. Instead, the stars behind it twisted like they were being swallowed. A soft ripple, and then Hopefire folded inward. Not exploded. Collapsed. Every atom, every byte of data, every memory, gone. Like it had never existed. Gone in less than 5 seconds. We didn't speak on the ride back to Earth Orbit Command. There was nothing left to say. Hopefire was gone. And now we knew what the Council was really capable of. Not conquest, not war, erasure. We landed in Sector 9, one of the last underground command outposts still left operational after the Council's quarantine grid failed. I hadn't slept in almost 48 hours, but the moment I stepped off the shuttle, Lenore was waiting for me. Dark circles under his eyes, jaw tight like he hadn't unclenched in days. "Debrief," he said, no greeting. We walked side by side through steel corridors, humming with emergency power. The place was quieter than I remembered. No chatter, no tension, just dread. He led me to the war room, flicked on the monitors. There were 6, each showing a different angle of orbital space. 2 of them were black. "Hopefire?" I asked. "Gone," he confirmed. "Just like you saw. No debris, no communications. The logs cut out exactly at the timestamp you gave us." "You see it?" I asked. "The judge?" He nodded once. For a split second. Then our surveillance satellites fried, every single one. I didn't ask how many satellites we had left. "What about the others?" I asked. "Deliverance, New Bastion, Glass Arc?" He switched to another screen. 3 separate ship logs. Minimal data, all silent. "They're running dark," he said. "Off course but still alive. No sign of contact, no sign of betrayal." Yet. I dropped into a chair. My body ached, not from the mission, but from the weight of knowing just how little time we had left. "They know where we are now," I said. Lenore nodded again, slow. "Yeah, and they won't send another judge unless we do something stupid again." "We already did something stupid," I said. "We survived." That night, or what passed for night underground, I returned to the beacon. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't rest. Not with the memory of that thing still carved into the back of my skull. I plugged into the skeleton's core and opened the fracture drive. The message was still there. "We see." I stared at it, wondering what it meant. If they were still out there, still alive, the ones who broke away, who tried to warn us, who maybe, just maybe, knew how to fight back. That's when the core flickered. I jumped. Lines of new data flooded across the screen. Not from my input, not from any local command. It was responding. A second message appeared. "You summoned them. Now you must unmake the signal." I sat back. Unmake the signal? I didn't know what that meant, but I had one idea. The skeleton's core wasn't just a data node. It was a gateway, a relic from a council ship we'd shot down years ago. We'd never cracked its full systems. Until now. I started parsing the new data. It wasn't just warnings. It was schematics. Blueprints for something buried beneath the surface of the core. Something the council had tried to hide, beneath a dozen encryption layers. The file name translated loosely as Last Barrier. I opened it. It wasn't a weapon. It was a fail-safe. A disruption field, designed to jam quantum coordinates across council systems, a sort of black fog. A virus to blind their sensors, to make stars unreadable, signatures invisible, planets ghost-like. They'd built it for their own use, to hide rogue elements, to cover up mistakes. The Fracture had found it, hid it, waited for someone to activate it, and now I had it. I brought the file to Lenore the next morning, showed him the schematics, explained what it did. "You want to build a quantum smog machine," he said, reading over the documents. "Blind their eyes, hide us in plain sight." "Exactly. You think it'll work?" "No," I said honestly. "I know it'll work, because they were afraid enough to bury it." He stared at the screen. "This is alien code, Cale. We don't have the parts, the cores, the processors." "We do," I interrupted. "The rest of the skeleton. The pieces we never touched, the ones we were afraid to turn on." Lenore looked at me like I was mad. And maybe I was. But I'd seen what the Council could do, what they would do if we waited long enough. This wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about making ourselves impossible to catch, a myth, a shadow, a virus in their system they could never pin down again. He didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Let's build your smokescreen." Construction began immediately. We moved everything down to the dead ring, an old orbital relay station abandoned after the first solar grid collapsed. It had shielding, space, and no digital footprint. No one would look for us there. We ripped open the skeleton, took out everything we'd sealed for years. Plasma cores, neural engines, data we'd been too scared to read. The engineers worked double shifts. The AI specialists barely slept. Everyone knew what this was. Our last chance to disappear. And maybe our last chance to fight. Because if this smog worked, we wouldn't just vanish. We'd become a problem the Council couldn't erase. Not because they didn't want to, but because they wouldn't be able to find us again. We called it the Fog Engine. A dumb name, maybe, but the team liked it. Easier to say than Quantum Entropic Interference Disruption System, or whatever fancy acronym the engineers tried to push. It fit, because once it went live, that's what the universe would see when it looked for us. Fog. No coordinates, no signatures, just a smear in space where humanity used to be. That was the plan anyway. The truth? We had no idea what would happen. We were building something from alien code, half-interpreted tech, and pieces of a ship we didn't even understand. The skeleton was never supposed to run in full, but we'd pushed it past safe limits. We didn't have a choice anymore. Lenore brought in every blacklisted mind he could find. Exiled engineers, paranoid physicists, people who hadn't seen sunlight in years. They worked in silence, lit only by the humming glow of circuits older than Earth's oldest nation. I didn't sleep. I monitored every test, ran diagnostics until my fingers cramped, and when I wasn't working, I was watching the stars. Because I knew, deep down, the Council hadn't left. They were waiting. Day 11 into the Fog Engine's construction, something strange happened. The skeleton started resisting. Not in a mechanical way. No overheating or failure. It was more like a will. Systems flickered when they shouldn't have. Data logs reversed themselves. One AI core shut itself down entirely, fried to slag. We ran every security check we had, looking for sabotage. Nothing turned up. Lenore thought it was corruption. I disagreed. "I think it's conscious," I said, staring into the core housing that pulsed like a heartbeat. He looked at me sideways. "We've had this thing for years. We've studied it for years, never powered it to full strength, never accessed the root neural feed. And now that we are?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. It wasn't a ship. It was a sentient archive, a weapon made of memory, one that didn't like being used. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when it spoke. I was in the control chamber, running another diagnostic on the energy nodes when the voice came. Not through the speakers, not through any system, in my head. You were not chosen. You were tolerated. I staggered back, pulse racing. The room was empty. No communications, no feeds. You are the smoke at the end of a failed flame. I grabbed the console, grounding myself. Who are you? We were the architects, the overseers, the first fracture. They called us that when we refused silence. And just like that, the connection snapped. I sat there in the dark for over an hour, sweating, shaking, thinking. So it was real. The fracture wasn't a myth. It wasn't just broken data or glitched council code. They were alive, inside the skeleton, or what was left of them. I didn't tell Lenore. Not yet. Not until I could be sure I wasn't losing my mind. I needed proof. So I dove back into the logs, into the fragments of language buried deep beneath the fog engine's interface. And what I found chilled me worse than the judge ever could. There were other experiments. Whole species, entire civilizations, created, tested, burned. Some never made it past their first stage. Others lasted long enough to touch the stars. But in every case, the council stepped in, silently, efficiently, like a machine purging a bad file. We were just the latest line of code in a program that had been running for millions of years. And yet, we'd done something none of the others had. We'd looked back, we'd seen them, and that made us dangerous. The fog engine came online on day 16. Final test cycle complete, all parameters in the green. The power required was enormous, enough to drain 6 orbital stations for a year. But we only needed it to work once. We'd set it to release a pulse into the quantum substratum, a field that would cover our entire sector, ripple through faster than light routes, and scramble the Council's tracking algorithms. If it worked, they'd never find us again. If it didn't, they'd know exactly where to strike. Lenore gave me the final call. Your idea, your madness, he said, lighting one of his last smuggled cigarettes. You want to flip the switch? I hesitated, not because I was scared of failure, but because something inside me whispered that once we did this, we were no longer human, not in the way we used to be. This was our first real defiance, not escape, not survival, rebellion. Light it, I said. He nodded, gave the order, and we watched the sky burn. The pulse wasn't like any weapon we'd fired before. It didn't explode. It unfolded, like a ripple under skin, like a wave on a flat ocean that carried nothing but still made everything move. You could feel it in your bones. You could taste it in your teeth. Then silence. No alarms, no feedback. Just a low, constant hum across every comm channel, like the universe had been wrapped in a blanket of static. Lenore checked the sensors. All clear. I checked the quantum log relays. No bounce back. We ran trace scans. Nothing. Not even a flicker. We'd disappeared. Celebration didn't come fast. Not because we weren't relieved, but because we didn't trust it. That's what happens after you've been prey for too long. You don't cheer when the predator leaves. You wait to see if it's still circling. But after 72 hours of pure silence, the mood began to shift. The comm lines to New Bastion reopened. Glass Arc pinged back with coordinates. Deliverance, I sent a full systems check and a message. Signal clear, trajectory locked, rebuilding begins. We'd done it. We'd bought our species time. We'd become the ghosts the Council couldn't track. But even in the middle of that moment, I couldn't feel relief, because I knew what the voice in the skeleton had said. You were tolerated, not embraced, not accepted, just allowed to persist. For now. And that meant only one thing. The real war hadn't started yet. We vanished, Just like that. No alerts, no scans, no angry messages from the stars. One pulse, and we were erased from every known council system. A smear of nothing across the grid. Humanity, the pest species, just another ghost story drifting beyond council jurisdiction. They couldn't find us anymore. But something else did. 3 days after the fog engine fired, the skeleton core lit up without input. That was the first red flag. It wasn't just reactivating a function, it was alive. Running subroutines none of us had seen before. Deep processes looping through code not even the most corrupted fracture logs had hinted at. And then it started talking. Out loud this time. Through the speakers. You have deviated from all observed outcomes. Everyone in the chamber froze. I was already at the console before the engineers could blink. Identify, I said. No identification exists. Designation. Null thread. Are you the fracture? We are what remains when control is broken, a splinter, an echo, an orphaned seed. Cryptic as hell. But that was normal with alien intelligence. They didn't hand out clear answers. You had to earn them, or survive them. Why are you here? Because now, they're afraid. I stared at the waveform as it pulsed through the main display. The fog engine was never meant to be used by the infected. I felt my stomach twist. You mean us? You are the infection. The error they buried under 1,000 lies. They created a cage, and you burned the map. So what now? I asked. They can't find us? Number but others will. I stepped back. That wasn't a warning. It was a prophecy. Lenore didn't believe me at first. He chalked it up to a neural feedback glitch or AI confusion. But by the time the 4th fracture message played, he was sitting right beside me, face pale, cigarette forgotten in his hand. The messages weren't idle chatter. They were a timeline, a sequence of events. It laid out what would come next. Disappearance triggers the hunt. The judges will fall back, blind. But the harvesters will rise. I didn't understand what that meant, at least not at first. But the files went deeper. Raw, fragmented glimpses of past experiments. The ones who also vanished. Not all of them were wiped out. Some had simply gone too far. And something worse than the council came looking for them. They are older than the code. They do not judge, they consume. They follow rot. We had become the rot. We weren't designed to be predators, not on this scale. Evolution made us clever, aggression made us defiant, but survival had made us reckless. The fog engine didn't just hide us, it ripped a hole through the observation net that kept things out. And now? We were wide open. I tried to shut the skeleton down. We pulled every wire, drained every core. It didn't matter. The thing was broadcasting on a frequency that wasn't even measurable, slipping through dimensional strata we barely understood. Then came the signal. Not from the council. Not from any known language. Just a pattern. 13 pulses. Wait. 9 pulses. Wait. 13 again. The log said this was how they marked their prey. The harvesters. The skies changed after that. We had observers posted across the dead moons and orbital outposts. One by one they started going dark. No explosions, no debris, just blackouts. Like someone had unplugged them from the universe. Then the dreams began. I didn't sleep much anymore, but when I did, I woke up drenched in sweat, heart thundering in my ears. Fire, teeth, stars bleeding, a low hum that sounded like it was inside my spine. Others reported the same. Some started speaking in fragments of unknown languages. Some scratched symbols into the walls of their bunks. One man took out his own eyes with a rusted bolt before we could sedate him. None of it made sense. Until I went back into the skeleton one final time. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Lenore. I activated the deep conduit myself, bypassed the security layers, ignored every red warning light. I wasn't looking for answers anymore. I was looking for truth. The skeleton didn't fight me this time. It opened like a wound. And what I saw inside, it wasn't technology. It was memory, billions of lives, a chorus of extinction screams, whole planets blinking out while council judges stood in silence. But at the end, just past the fading star systems and shattered colonies, something else moved. Something with no shape, just intention. It consumed the silence. It fed on what was forgotten. The fracture had tried to run, tried to hide, just like us. But they failed. Because once the harvesters marked a species, they didn't stop. They didn't negotiate. They devoured history. They erased memory. That was their purpose, to clean up the messes the council couldn't contain. And now, they were coming for us. I surfaced from the skeleton's core, shaking. 2 engineers were trying to get me to lie down, saying I'd been unresponsive for 6 minutes. I didn't argue. I couldn't speak yet. My mouth was dry and my heart felt like it was skipping every 3rd beat. Lenore was in my quarters an hour later. He didn't sit, just stood at the edge of the table. "You've seen them?" he said. I nodded. "So it's true." "They don't want our bodies," I said. "They want our existence." He ran a hand through his gray-streaked beard, then exhaled hard. "What the hell do we do now?" I looked him in the eyes, and for once, I gave him the truth without filter. "We run!" But it wasn't that simple. The fog engine had anchored itself into our reality. It was working too well, too efficiently. We couldn't just shut it off. Doing so would snap us right back into visibility, and the council wouldn't send a second judge. They'd send a fleet. We had one path left, a leap. The fracture's data contained coordinates, off the grid, a pocket in space carved during an early rebellion, a null zone, no light, no gravity, no time, a place the council refused to acknowledge, because it was the only place they couldn't touch. But there was a catch. We'd have to break space itself to get there, and to do that, we'd need to finish what the fracture started. We'd need to burn the skeleton's core. Burning the skeleton's core was suicide. That's what every engineer said. That's what the last surviving physicist on the dead ring screamed at me when I handed him the plans. "You light that thing, Kyle, and we won't just burn. We'll disappear from inside out." I didn't disagree. But the harvesters weren't something we could outfight or outrun. Not permanently. Not in a conventional sense. They didn't travel through space. They drifted through memory. They hunted species that left too big a mark in the quantum fabric. Noise, motion, chaos, that's what drew them. And humanity had been nothing but noise from the day we discovered fire. The skeleton, for all its danger, was our only key out. That pocket zone the fracture described? It couldn't be reached with engines. It wasn't a place, not really. It was a cut. A fissure between timelines, between observed and unobserved space. A place even the council didn't monitor, because they couldn't. If we could rip through the boundary, open the passage with the core's overload, we might survive. We'd be forgotten. But we'd live. Lenore didn't like the plan. He paced in silence when I laid it out, jaw clenched, every breath shaking with frustration. He'd given everything, blood, sweat, years of buried hope, to see us escape the council's reach. And now here I was, asking him to blow it all up. "I trusted you," he said finally. "I didn't lie." "No," he said. "You just left out the part where we punch a hole in space and hope it doesn't swallow us." "What's the alternative? Wait for something worse to find us?" He was silent. Then he looked at me, not like a soldier, not even like a commander. Just a man, tired, fractured, one bad day from total collapse. "Build the detonator," he said. "Prep the ships. If this is the only way forward—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. We moved fast. Only 2 ships had enough quantum shielding to survive the rift jump. Vigilant, and Deliverance OI. The rest were repurposed, modified with scavenged plating, pulse wave diffusers, and gravitational tethers. They wouldn't last long, but they didn't need to. The plan was simple, at least on paper. We'd rig the core to breach the rift just beyond the dead ring's orbit. A controlled detonation, enough to carve open the fracture gate and collapse it after the fleet passed through. No trail, no path back, one shot. The last shot. The core hummed like a storm waiting to break. Engineers worked in shifts, feeding it power, stabilizing its pulse. I stayed in the chamber most nights, watching the lines of alien code dance across its surface like veins pulsing under metal skin. It felt wrong. Not evil. Not cursed. Just not ours. The fracture had used this once, a desperate act during their fall. The record said only 12 ships made it through, and they'd been forced to erase everything behind them. Names, language, even their own memories. That was the price of disappearing. And I couldn't help but wonder, were they still out there? Or had they become something else? Something hollow? 12 hours before activation, Lenore handed me a data chip. "What's this?" I asked. "Command logs," he said. "Nav points, DNA credentials. You're taking Deliverance I through the gate." I shook my head. "You're the leader." "No," he said. "I'm the anchor." He turned to face the engine, watching its light ripple across the walls. "Someone has to stay behind," he said. "Trigger the collapse, seal the rift after the last ship." My stomach dropped. "We can automate it." "Too risky. If the collapse starts early, you get crushed in the breach. Too late, and the harvesters trace it. We need precision, human timing." "Lenore," he cut me off with a hard look. "Don't argue, Kyle. This was always how it ends for me." I looked him in the eye. "You sure about this?" "I died the day the council marked us," he said. "This is just the final step." We loaded the fleet. Everyone on board knew what this meant. There would be no return. No Earth, no past, just a hole in the void and the hope that it led to something livable. I didn't give speeches. No one wanted one. Just hard nods, final checks, whispered prayers. Families were huddled together in cryo chambers. Soldiers manned the decks with stone expressions. Kids slept in arms that trembled behind smiles. We were running from gods into a wound in reality, chasing the fading echo of another lost race. Hope was all we had, and even that felt borrowed. I stood with Lenore in the engine room just minutes from countdown. He didn't say anything. So I did. "I'll remember you." He smirked. "No, you won't. That's the point." He wasn't wrong. Once we passed through, memory would fracture. That was part of the process. The energy from the rift interfered with brain chemistry. Identities blur. Names fade. It was like rebooting the soul. To stay hidden, we had to forget. But I wasn't ready for that. "Write something," I told him. "Something short. For after." He looked confused. "Stick it to the chamber wall," I said. "Maybe. Someone will find it." He paused, then nodded. He pulled a piece of tape from his jacket, took a scrap of old ration paper, scribbled 3 words. I didn't look. "Not yet." I boarded. Deliverance. I, in silence, gave the green light. "All ships, hold course. Target the core." The rift engine fired. The sky went white, and then it tore. Reality split like paper dipped in flame. Stars bent, light folded, sound warped into pressure. The ships moved forward, tethered together in a column of defiance, into a hole that led nowhere. One by one, they slipped through. I was last. As I crossed the event horizon, I looked back. The chamber was glowing. Lenore stood in the center, eyes closed, hand on the console. Still, unmoving. Then, he pressed the detonator. The rift snapped shut like a jaw, and everything behind us died. I woke up with a name I couldn't remember. No home, no earth, no childhood, only the feeling of heat and gravity and the hollow ache of loss. Deliverance was intact. So were the other ships. We were floating in a place with no stars, no planets, just cold silence and deep dark. But we were alive. Somehow. I walked to the main corridor, found the panel we'd carved our ship ID into before launch. It was still there. I ran my fingers across the word deliverance, not knowing why it mattered. Something in me ached. Then, I remembered. Just a flicker. A room, a man with a beard, and a piece of paper on the wall. I rushed to the archive bay, pulled the chamber logs, searched the file, found it. One image. A still shot of the final moment before the rift closed. And on the wall, scrawled in trembling handwriting, "We lived."